Hello everyone, this is Logan589XP here, back for another episode of the Nin-Cast as we continue our discussion of the next generation of gaming. Last time around, we talked about Microsoft and the Xbox Series X and the kind of recap of the Xbox Game Showcase, what Microsoft has going for them and what they don't have going for them, and all that stuff. So if you want to hear my thoughts on the Series X and what their strategy is going into this generation, go watch the previous video. But today we're going to be talking about the big boy, the one that is clearly in the lead right now for the current generation and is set, as far as I can tell. I think it's pretty safe to say that Sony's streak will be continuing into this generation. And of course, I'm talking about the PlayStation 5. Now, Sony right now obviously has a very, very strong brand right now. I think that's something that cannot be understated. The PlayStation brand right now is arguably the strongest it has ever been. And PlayStation has always been a very strong brand. Going back to the original PlayStation, the PS1, that originally came out in 1994 in Japan and lasted up until about 2000 or 2001 when the PlayStation 2 finally released. How many units did it sell? 100 million. I believe it's a little more than that, but 100 million. PlayStation 2. PlayStation 2 is considered by many, many people to be the best console ever made, with so many classic games. In fact, Sony themselves said a lot later on when they were kind of selling the PS2 as more of a budget system, they were always talking about how the console had 10,000 games. Yes, the PlayStation 2 has 10,000 games on it. That's how big that platform was. And how much did the PlayStation 2 sell? About, I want to say 150 million. It might actually be more than that. You know what? Let me go check right now, actually. I believe, actually, that might be the amount that the Nintendo DS sold. It might be way more than that. 155 million. So yeah, it is, as of right now, still the best-selling console of all time, and honestly, I can't say I'm surprised. I mean, I didn't really grow up during the PlayStation 2 generation. I grew up during the previous generation, the Wii, Xbox 360, PS3, but still, like, the impact of the PlayStation 2 obviously cannot be ignored. And then we move into the PlayStation 3, and as we all know, Sony stumbled with the PlayStation 3, the $599 price tag, the here's a giant enemy crab, all the games that they showed that never materialized or were far beyond the scope of what the system could actually do, like the infamous Killzone 2 demo or the infamous MotorStorm demo. All that stuff that you probably already know about if you pay attention to these things. But even though Sony stumbled out of the gate for the first couple of years, Microsoft gained a huge leg up. Like, Microsoft took serious advantage of the fact that Sony stumbled with the PlayStation 3 because of their success with the PlayStation 2. Which, of course, would eventually happen to Microsoft where, hey, we did really well with the 360, so now we can do whatever we want with the Xbox One, and it will sell no matter what. And we knew what happened. All the stuff that happened with the Xbox One during its launch, like before launch with the Don Matrick and the DRM and the TV and all the stuff I talked about in the previous videos happened. But, of course, eventually Microsoft relented, and the DRM never actually made its way to the console. And nowadays, the Xbox One, I think, is a very solid platform. But there's no denying that Sony took huge advantage of Microsoft's missteps with the Xbox One. Probably most infamously so with that famous video that I'm pretty sure I've brought up every single time I've talked about these things. You know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the video from 2013 that's like how to share games on PS4. That video, and they got, step one, and it's just thanks PlayStation. Like, that video is so good, it's so legendary. To this day, I still see comments on that video talking, it's like, and that, kids, is how Sony won the generation, and all kinds of stuff. And I bet people at Microsoft still shudder when they see this video. All kinds of comments in the video. Of course, you can go check it out. Just type in, like, how to share games on PS4 or whatever, and it'll come up. Or you can just go to the PlayStation channel and just sort by most popular. It'll probably be, like, in the top 5 or whatever. I don't remember how many views it has, but I'm pretty sure it's crossed at least the 10 million mark. And that right there was basically, once that video happened, that was, like, it. Like, that was the video that basically all but guaranteed Sony's success this generation. And while Phil Spencer did come in after Don Matrick was kicked out, and he did slowly build up the brand with, of course, the Xbox One S and the One X happened. We got Game Pass. And just, incorporating new features that people actually wanted. Like, slowly rebuilding the brand trust of Xbox that had been severely damaged because of Don Matrick and all that stuff. Well, even still, in 2020, PlayStation, it's not even close. It's so much further ahead than Microsoft. Even though Microsoft has come a long way since the Xbox One launch in 2013, they still have a long way to go before they catch up to PlayStation in terms of, brand power right now, because PlayStation is just so strong right now. I mean, the PS4 sold 110 million units. Everyone has one. Everyone loves the PS4. It's basically the PS2 days again. It's not like it was last generation where the 360 did really, really, really well early on, but it kind of leveled out by the end of the generation. And in fact, by the end of the generation, the PS3 did sell more. Not by much, though. The 360 sold, I believe, 80 million, and then the PS3 sold 85 million. But still, the PS3 did eventually catch up. But for the most part, they were pretty neck and neck that generation. But this generation, I mean, again, Phil Spencer did his best to resurrect what Don Matrick gave him, but it just couldn't quite be salvaged to the extent that Microsoft probably wanted, which is the reason why they have pivoted away. Like, how in recent years they've been all like, the hardware is not important. What matters is, the games being available on multiple platforms, so more revenue streams and, stuff like Game Pass, like services and the games. That's more important to us than selling hardware. I don't think it's a secret to anyone that the main reason why they have gone that route is specifically because the Xbox One didn't do well, or at least it didn't do nearly as well as Microsoft hoped it would. It didn't even come close to the 360 sales. I mean, Xbox One, at the end of its lifespan here in not the end, but like the end of the generation, basically. Nearing the end of 2020, as we creep along towards the next generation beginning sometime in November, most likely, the Xbox One is currently at about 50 million units sold, which is not a bad number. It really isn't a bad number, but compare that to the Xbox 360's 80 million. That's 30 million difference. And of course, add on top of that, the PS4 is 110 million, and now the Xbox One is less than half the install base. And that is probably the reason why Microsoft decided to pivot away from focusing strictly on the hardware and focusing more on the software, which in a way makes sense, because of course, if you know Microsoft, you know their history, you will know that with the exception of Xbox and like the Surface tablets and stuff in more recent years, they have been primarily a software company. Of course, they begin, Windows, of course, and Office, among other things. Like, they're primarily a software company. That's what they primarily are. It's only with Xbox and with Surface that they have entered into the hardware market. And there's also stuff like the Microsoft Studio and stuff like that. But like, for the most part, they're a software company, so it makes sense for them to want to focus on software, even if you ignored their obvious, loss in hardware sales. It does make sense why they would want to pivot towards that, even if the system did sell as well as they wanted. But the fact remains, however you see it, the fact remains, Xbox One sold less than half of what the PS4 sold, and the PlayStation brand is much, much, much stronger. But of course, there's much more to their strength than just the Xbox shot themselves in the foot so badly, which is a big reason why PlayStation is so strong, because PlayStation, for most of this generation, has pushed a very, that term you've heard all over the place, for the players, right? We've got the stuff that the players want. We don't have any of that DRM crap. You can buy used games, you can use used games. There's no code, there's no pass, there's none of that. You can use used games the way you always have. We got all of the big games you want, and we got exclusives. And that, of course, brings us to the other big reason why PlayStation is so far ahead right now from Xbox. And that's not just the brand strength, because Xbox shot in their foot so bad, and they supported things that Xbox didn't support or wasn't going to support at launch. And that, of course, was exclusives. Now, in my opinion, the first 2 to 3 years of the generation, I think Xbox had the better exclusives, at least in my personal opinion. But starting particularly in 2016 with the release of Uncharted 4. From that point onward, PlayStation just was on a roll. They just absolutely just destroyed whatever Microsoft had. And I'm not saying Microsoft didn't have some decent games. They did. I personally like Forza Horizon. I really enjoy that. Of course, Halo was always there. You know, MCC eventually was fixed, and now MCC is in a much better state than it was at launch. And of course, Halo Infinite is coming out, but we already talked about the Halo Infinite stuff last time around. However, Sony, it's like, Sony is just like a whole other ballgame. I mean, with Uncharted, God of War, Spider-Man, Last of Us, Ghost of Tsushima, older titles like Bloodborne. Like, Bloodborne is considered by many people to be the best game on the system. And that's from earlier on in the generation. Like, you know how I said, for the most part, I thought Xbox had the leg up in terms of exclusives early on? That was not counting Bloodborne, because Bloodborne was a relatively early edition. Like, it wasn't 2014, but it was like early 2015. I think like February or March 2015. So it was relatively early on in the generation, and it just, to this day, people still consider it like the best game on the system. And people really, really want that game to get ported to PC so they can play it at 60 FPS without bad frame pacing. Something that From Software games in general have become famous for. But this isn't a Digital Foundry video. If you want to learn more about that stuff, go watch Digital Foundry. But yeah, overall though, like, PlayStation compared to Xbox is definitely the king when it comes to exclusives. I think pretty much everyone agrees on that at this point. I like Halo, I like Forza, well, Forza Horizon. I don't really care much for Forza Motorsport, but Forza Horizon I do like. And of course, Halo is Halo. But with those two exceptions, and then maybe stuff like Rare Replay, I mean, look at Sony's. It's not really even a contest. I mean, what's the number one reason people even buy a PS4 or PlayStation in general these days? Well, it's because of those exclusives. And that's going to continue into the next generation. But we'll talk about the lineup that Sony has up compared to Microsoft's upcoming lineup in a bit. The next reason why I feel like PlayStation has garnered a lot more interest, and when I say PlayStation, I mean the PlayStation 5 specifically in this case, why I believe the PlayStation 5 has garnered so much more support and interest and hype than the Xbox Series X is because the PlayStation 5 looks next gen. Like the design, the infamous, still controversial-ish design that looks like a router. Like, say what you will about it, but when you look at it, there's no doubt in your mind that that's a next-gen console. When you see that thing, it looks next-gen. It's got this new design that no other console has had before. Like, it just looks like a next-gen machine. It doesn't look like your standard black-ish box. It looks like a next-gen machine. And of course, it has a next-gen controller with a new form factor and additional features such as a built-in speaker, which, by the way, outside of the original Famicom controllers, is the only controller I know of in console history to have a built-in, like first-party, not third-party controllers, like built-in stock first-party stuff is what I'm talking about here. I believe, yeah, outside of the original Famicom from, like, you know, the original 1983, like, you know, the Famicom, not the AV Famicom or any of that stuff, just the original, and I believe the Sharp Twin Famicom. It's that the PlayStation 5 controller, the DualSense, is the only other controller I know of that has a built-in speaker. And it also has the haptic feedback stuff that they've talked about in patents, and it has, of course, the Type-C port, although the Xbox controller is going to have a Type-C port as well. You know, it's kind of funny. You know, people like to rag on Nintendo for being stuck in the past, and as much as I love Nintendo, that's definitely a thing that they have for some things at the very least. And despite that, they were the first to adopt Type-C on consoles. The Switch itself uses Type-C for the dock, but more importantly, the Switch Pro controllers use Type-C in 2017. Only now, with the PlayStation 5 and the Series X, are the you know, Sony and Microsoft are adopting Type-C. And I mean, I'm not complaining. I'm glad they're adopting Type-C, because Type-C is awesome. But it's just kind of funny how the normally, you know, stuck in the past Nintendo was actually ahead when it came to adopting USB Type-C. Just kind of a weird thing to think about, but anyways. But yeah, the DualSense is a lot more next-gen looking than Microsoft's controller on the Series X, because And I like the Series X controller because it's basically just the Xbox One controller, which was already a fantastic controller. I have 3 of them. I have my original Xbox One controller from my original fat Betamax Xbox One from 2015 that I still use to this day, as well as 2 newer ones that I have acquired in more recent years that have the new, fancy grip on the bottom, and that just makes it feel really nice. And the nice, more, less corrodable, I guess, like thumbsticks. The thumbsticks on the newer controllers don't degrade nearly as fast as the old ones. I actually had to buy a bunch of, control sticks off of eBay just because my old 2015 controller, it kept wearing out. In fact, right now, on my 2015 controller, it feels kind of like... here's the controller, you can kind of hear it. It feels just like, you can tell the top is wearing off, and it feels kind of weird, especially after coming back from the newer controllers that have the better sticks. But enough about that. Point is, with the exception of adding the share button, which that's a great thing they're adding. I mean, even Nintendo had a share button, by the way. And again, going back to the whole thing of the normally stuck in the past Nintendo, they adopted the share button before Microsoft did. Of course, Sony did it originally in 2013 on the PS4, but only now in 2020 is Microsoft making a share button. Even the Elite controllers, even the newest one from last year, which has gotten rave reviews, even that doesn't have a share button, but the new stock Series X controller will. So, hey, better late than never. But it's just kind of funny that Nintendo had a share button before Microsoft did. It's just so weird, but yeah. So with the exception of, I believe there's gonna be it's gonna have a new textured grip type thing, which is nice, and I believe the triggers are a little different. But by and large, the Series X controller is just the Xbox One controller, which is fine, but that comes at the cost of not being exciting. It just means that, hey, it's just the Xbox One controller. Cool, I guess, but it's not exciting. It's not next gen. It's not new. It's not new and shiny. The PlayStation has that. The DualSense is new, and it has legitimately new features. Now, of course, a speaker being in a controller is not inherently new. Again, the Famicom had that in 1983, but no console controller has had that for a very long time. And it has new haptic feedback that hasn't been in any controller before, on top of course, all the stuff from the previous controller, like the touchpad and the gyro sensor, which, for the record, I do think that the Series X controller should have incorporated, because I feel like that's the main thing holding us back from having gyro controls in all of the multiplats, because gyro controls are a heavily, heavily underrated feature, in my opinion. It depends on the game. But let me give you a very good example. Let's talk about Breath of the Wild, right? Breath of the Wild, and you're trying to aim the bow. If you're playing the game on Wii U with the gamepad, or you're just playing it on the Switch with any of the controllers, it's very natural. You just aim, and you move the gyro around, and you shoot. It's very natural, and it works really well. Now, try turning gyro off in the game, and try aiming with the bow. It's an absolute nightmare. It's really annoying. And that's what I had to deal with when I was playing the Wii U version before I got a Switch. And I played the game with a combination of the gamepad with the gyro sensor and with the Wii U Pro controller. And the Wii U Pro controller, unlike the Switch Pro controller and the gamepad, didn't have gyro sensing, so you just had to use the stick. And it is not a great experience, but when you have that gyro sensor, it makes all the difference. It's not a drastic improvement in the way the game controls, all things considered, but it's a huge deal. And again, Splatoon 2. Splatoon 2 with gyro is a requirement. You turn gyro off and you can play it, but it just isn't the same. And people have been asking for this gyro functionality in Sony's games because the PS4 controller does support the gyro feedback that the Switch controllers do. And people have been asking to have a gyro sensor for the bow in Horizon Zero Dawn. And that would be a cool thing to have. If Breath of the Wild can do it, then Horizon should be able to do it. Maybe it'll be in Horizon Forbidden West. That'd be really cool, but we'll have to wait and see what happens there. But my general point here is the DualSense is a much more exciting controller than the Xbox Series X controller. The Series X controller was Microsoft just saying, hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I get it. It makes sense. But again, it's just not exciting from a hype perspective. It's just kind of oh, it's just the Xbox One controller. And that's all there is to say about it. Whereas, PS5, ooh, new shiny, new color palette. It's got new features. It's got a more bulky form factor. Like, it looks different. It's a different controller. So it's more exciting. So a new controller that's different than the last one, and a brand new console design that we've never seen before. It makes the system feel new and next gen because it's not something we've seen before. It's brand new. Sony themselves said that was what they wanted to accomplish with the PlayStation 5 design. They wanted you to look at it and say, yeah, this thing is next gen, and they accomplished that with flying colors. So props to you for Sony for that. So what about the Series X design? It's definitely different, without question, than the rest of the console designs. It does, in a way, accomplish the same task that Sony had for the PlayStation 5. They want to have a design that looks completely different than anything before it. And technically speaking, Microsoft did do that. I mean, the Series X, with its infamous mini fridge look to it, it doesn't look like any previous console. But does it look next gen? Well, that's of course a matter of opinion. I would say not really. It feels more like, well, a PC mini tower or just a computer. It doesn't feel like it's this next gen magical thing. It just feels like, oh, it's a really beefy computer, which is technically what the Series X is. It is a really beefy computer. That's what all consoles are. All consoles are computers. But when you look at the Series X, you don't really see a console. You see more of a computer, like something that looks very technical. Whereas you look at the PlayStation 5, you don't see specs. You don't see power. You see something that you can tell is definitely next generation just by looking at it. Sony doesn't have to tell you the specs. You just look at the console and you can see that it's next gen just by looking at it. And that's one of the aspects I think that definitely has a up against Microsoft, is the console just screams next gen without even talking about the specs. New controller, brand new console design, you look at it, it's next gen. So that's the second reason why I think the PlayStation 5 has an up over Microsoft. Next up, this is a much smaller thing. It isn't nearly as big of a thing as the last two, but it is something that as of right now, as of August 4th, 2020, as I'm recording this, they are the only ones that are doing this so far. Who knows? Things could change really quickly. This video could be outdated in a day. Tomorrow, Microsoft can announce something, but we'll see what happens. But as of right now, Sony is the only of the two that is offering a disc version and a digital version. Now, this has been very controversial, and I understand why. On paper, this is very simple and not really, and you're probably thinking, oh, what's the big deal? If you want discs, then buy the disc version. If you don't care about discs, buy the digital version. What's the big deal? It's just giving you more options. True, and on paper, there is nothing inherently wrong with this. The reason why people have a problem with this is because people are seeing through, quote unquote, Sony's strategy. Oh, and they're cooking up, conspiracy theories like, oh, I see what they're trying to do here. They're going to introduce a digital option. It's cheaper. And then everyone's going to buy the digital option. And they're going to phase out the disc version. They're not going to make consoles with disc drives anymore. They're going to go fully digital. They have a monopoly on gaming. We're going to have to buy overpriced prices from the PlayStation store. Like, all that stuff, right? Like, people are looking into, like, the distant future, and they're looking at the apocalyptic hellhole that is digital-only gaming and all this stuff. And it's like, okay, guys, let's reel that back a bit. Just because there's a digital version doesn't mean they're going to get rid of the disc version. Because I've seen people speculate that, oh, halfway through the generation, they're going to get rid of the disc version. You're only going to be able to get it digitally. They're not going to do that. Because it doesn't make any sense. Why would you do that? Also, the disc version isn't the secondary version. It's the main version. The disc version of the PlayStation 5 is just called that, the PlayStation 5. It's the main version of the console, the main one. The digital edition is called PlayStation 5 Digital Edition. It's the secondary one. If the digital edition was the main version, it would just be called PlayStation 5, and the disc version would just be called PlayStation 5 Disc Edition. But they're not calling it that. By the way of wording, it's very clear that the disc version of the PlayStation 5 is the main version. And if anything, the digital edition will be the one that's discontinued first. So no, I don't think discs are going away anytime soon. So I don't think that's something to get super worried about right now. Because think about it. How many times has there been talks of, oh, everything's going to go digital only, everything's going to go digital only? People were saying this at the beginning of this generation in 2013. And it's 2020, and both of the new consoles have disc drives on them. Yeah, there's a digital only version, at least for PlayStation, but the disc version is still there. It's still the main version of the console, and chances are most people are still going to buy the disc version, because here's something that you got to remember. Even if you buy a lot of games digitally, a lot of people like having the option to have a disc. They just like having it there. Even if they never use it, they just like knowing that, hey, if I want to buy a disc version, I can. Even if I don't, I like having the option. And I think that alone is going to be the reason why people buy a disc version. If it's not for the whole, oh, I don't want to support a digital-only future. Even if, whether you're not buying a digital edition because you're worried about a digital-only future, or you're not buying it just because you want to have your discs, or because you want to have the option to have a disc, I think just overall, the disc version is going to sell more, at least initially. We'll see what happens in the long run. We'll see how, maybe if the digital version doesn't do well, like for example, the Xbox One S All Digital Edition, from what I have gathered, depending on who you ask, it either bombed or it did really well, or at least really well by whatever Microsoft would consider to be really well, but we'll have to wait and see what that is. And as I alluded to earlier, Microsoft has not announced a digital-only Series X just yet. However, the Series S is rumored to not have a disc drive, so that might be their digital-only console for the generation, and of course with its lower price tag, it could definitely do some damage. But the PlayStation 5, though, I don't think the digital edition is as big of a deal as people are making it out to be. At least right now. We'll have to see what happens. Maybe in a couple years, this will all be different. Maybe they will get rid of the disc version, and they'll make in the PlayStation 5 Pro when it comes out, if it happens, because we don't know if it's going to happen or not. Maybe that will be digital only. But as of right now, I see no reason why Sony... And here's another thing you got to remember, too. If they got rid of the disc drive, what reason do the big retailers have to stock their consoles? Because one of the big advantages to having, of course, to why, like, Target and Walmart and all the different stores would want to have a console there, is because if they can sell someone on a console at that store, that means they're more likely to come back and buy more games and accessories from their store. So there's no way that the retail chains would want a digital-only console, because that's just one purchase for them. Whereas if you sell a disc-based console, where you can actually buy more games physically, you're more likely to come back to the store to buy more physical games, which is more revenue for all the companies. So it's in Sony's best interest to keep the disc version around. Solely because the retailers are going to have none of that. Like, why should they sell a digital-only version of a console when it gains them no extra revenue? So, again, we'll see what happens. But at the end of the day, that is a thing. You can buy a disc version or you can buy a digital version. And I know there's a lot of people out there that are going to buy a digital edition. I know I just talked all over the place about how the disc version is going to be the one that most people buy. And I think, at least among the more hardcore subset of people, it will definitely be the one that sells better, without question. But I can definitely see a digital edition doing well with a certain audience. The audience that only plays a couple of games anyway. Like the people that just play COD and FIFA, for example. Like, I could see them getting a digital-only console. And of course, you gotta remember that the disc version is also going to support 4K Blu-ray, something that the PS4 Pro sadly did not support. So there's that too. And I have seen a lot of people out there that are like, oh, I gotta get a disc version. Even if I don't buy any games for it, I want a 4K Blu-ray player. But, of course, as time progresses, physical media for movies has waned. I mean, it's still going, but, we'll see how that ends. But, okay, we're gonna move on from this point. But, long story short, Sony has options. Microsoft, as of right now, doesn't. But the Series S might be that other option. But if you want to save some money and you don't buy disc games anyway, you can buy a digital edition for maybe $100 less. We don't know if it's going to be $100 less. Maybe it'll be $50 less, but we'll see what happens. But the options are there. Next up is more so something that I think is there to keep people from switching more than anything else. But that is Sony's exclusivity deals. This generation, Sony has made a big emphasis on having these exclusive deals with all the different companies, like Rockstar and Activision, where you get exclusive content or timed exclusive content or bonus content just because you're on PlayStation. This is something that's happened with, GTA 5, Red Dead 2, the COD games ever since 2015 when Sony got the contract from Microsoft, and, Destiny early on as in like up until recently when Bungie actually partnered with Microsoft. Not for exclusive content, but for, Game Pass and stuff. And now every time you see a trailer for Destiny 2, it has the Xbox logo at the beginning instead of the PlayStation logo. So, yeah, but still. And probably most notably, this is really recent, as in like yesterday. It was announced that Spider-Man's going to be coming to the new Avengers game, but only on PlayStation. And that's super controversial, and that's something I could save for another time, because that's a whole topic into it of itself, with Sony and Marvel and Disney and all the wheelings and dealings going on there. That's its whole other video. But whether you like it or not, and most people don't like it, but it is what it is, the fact is, if you have a character as big as Spider-Man, Marvel's most popular character, if you got that only on PlayStation, people are going to buy the PlayStation version. And that's, of course, what Sony wants. Well, I think it's also because Sony wants to strengthen their mind share, their grip, the public perception of them and Spider-Man, where they want the public to associate Spider-Man with Sony, which they already do to a certain extent, because, of course, Sony owns the movie rights, and they already have the Insomniac Spider-Man games. So just having Spider-Man be exclusive to PlayStation just strengthens their grip. So when people think Spider-Man in gaming, they'll think, oh, Spider-Man's a Sony thing. It's a PlayStation thing because they own their movie rights or whatever. And that's just how it is. But again, that whole thing is a thing for another day. But the fact remains, they have exclusivity deals for big games. Whether it's something as small as just some extra skins or some extra bonuses, or something as big as a whole character. And this is not a timed exclusive. This is a full-on, like, if you want to play Spider-Man, you have to have the PlayStation version. This is not a timed exclusive. This is not $2.6 a year. This is the entire lifespan of the game. One whole character, the biggest character, only on PlayStation. That's huge. And that's going to sway people to buy the PlayStation version, which will come at the cost of the player base of the Xbox and PC version, because there's not going to be any crossplay as far as we're aware of. But at the end of the day, that's what Sony's doing. They're emphasizing the exclusivity deals. And there have been talks from people in the industry that have been saying, hey, if you are pissed about this Spider-Man deal, well, you better get ready, because there's a lot more of that stuff on the way. So in the next couple of months, we'll probably see even more exclusivity deals that may be even bigger than this one. But we'll have to wait and see what happens. But the fact remains, exclusivity deals will drive people to either buy a PlayStation, or if they're already on a PlayStation, that'll drive them to not want to switch away, because they don't want to lose those benefits from being on Sony's console. And now we've come to probably the other big reason why the PlayStation 5 is going to do so well. And that, of course, is, and I already said it before, but of course, the games. The current lineup they have lined up. They've already gained a ton of brand power and support with PlayStation 4. And all the exclusives that we had on there. Like, again, Uncharted, Last of Us. Well, say what you will about Last of Us 2, but, a Last of Us Remastered at least did insanely well. God of War, Spider-Man, Ghost of Tsushima, Infamous, Bloodborne, and there's Ratchet and Clank. There's even more games that I'm not remembering here, but you get the point, right? All those really big first-party exclusives. And that's set to continue with this generation. We got Spider-Man Miles Morales at launch. Then in 2021, we got Horizon Forbidden West. And then we got other games in development, like, of course, we got the new Ratchet and Clank that had that demo that showed off the SSD and what it can do. We had the Demon's Souls remake, which is hugely anticipated by a lot of people because, of course, Dark Souls and From Software have a big fan base nowadays that they've gained with Dark Souls, with Bloodborne, with Sekiro. And now their original, okay, not the first game they ever made, but like the one that started it all for the Souls franchise, Demon's Souls, is finally getting the remake that people have been asking for years. People have been asking for years for a Demon's Souls remake on PS4. And now it's finally coming, and it's coming from the masters of the remaster, as Digital Foundry likes to call them, Blue Point Games, which is the team that was responsible for the great Shadow of the Colossus remake. I personally haven't played it, but I've heard nothing but great things about it. And also, one thing that's also really cool about Blue Point is with Shadow of the Colossus, they built that remake around 60 frames per second. There is a 1080p 60 mode that never wavers. It's 60 FPS the entire time. And then they got like a higher resolution 1440p 30 mode. They have already confirmed that the Demon's Souls remake is going to have a high performance 60 FPS mode. And chances are, like Shadow of the Colossus, the game is going to be built with 60 FPS in mind first. And then a higher resolution will be optional after the fact. So everyone wins, basically, when it comes to Demon's Souls. And then we also have games that are going to be more out in the future, for example. Like, what's the name of the game? I am an idiot. There is a specific game I'm trying to remember here. Oh my god. You know what? Hold on. I'm going to quickly look this up. Yeah, I know. I'm clickety-clacketing right now, but I just am an idiot and I can't remember all the games, darn it. Oh my god, I'm forgetting a game. What was it? Okay, Destruction All-Stars. This is like sort of a Rocket League type game, but like, I don't know, it looks kind of like a Rocket League type game, but like not. It's kind of weird. But people are, interested in it. They're showing a bunch of third-party games. Show me first-party, darn it. Show me exclusives. Okay, the Gran Turismo 7. That one's probably not as big as some of the others, but, Gran Turismo, legendary franchise for Sony. It's been around since the PlayStation 1. And this game is a numbered entry, unlike Sport, which was like kind of a spin-off. So this is the first real entry in the franchise since 2013. And it shows the return of some of the classic courses that have been around since the original. So a lot of people are really looking forward to that. And of course, they've been showing off ray tracing and stuff for it. What else is there? Horizon Forbidden West. We already talked about that. Miles Morales. We talked about that. Why does this list have to show all of the third-party games? I just want to see first-party, darn it. That's the one that matters the most. Returnal. Actually, this game hasn't really been talked about all that much because it's a new IP. But this is from the creator of Dead Space, or one of the guys behind Dead Space, so it's definitely got a lot of interest from people, even though it's like a new IP. Why can't this just show a list of all of the first-party games, darn it? This would be so much easier. God of War 2. Yeah, I already meant. Yeah, God of War 2 is not confirmed, but it's coming. Come on. Of course it's coming. Darn it, why doesn't this have a list of all the first-party games? I should have just looked at this, darn it. Okay, so yeah, Astro's Playroom. This is going to be a built-in title at launch. Yeah, we talked about Demon's Souls, Destruction All-Stars. Gran Turismo 7 does not have a release date, but I'm going to say 2022, like early 2022 for that one. That's just what I feel. Yeah, Horizon Forbidden West. That's going to be the big game of 2021. Horizon is probably one of their biggest franchises now. It's their Breath of the Wild, basically. Miles Morales is at launch, and it's supposed to come with a remaster of the original game too, so that's really cool. Rift Apart, we talked about that. Returnal. Oh yeah, Sackboy: A Big Adventure. This game is kind of odd because I feel like this is going to be a cross-gen game. It's not confirmed to be, but I think this game is going to be on cross-gen. But we do not know that yet. But it is confirmed for 2021. So I don't think I have a list of every game, but the big ones are Miles Morales at launch, Horizon in 2021, Sackboy in 2021, and we also have Gran Turismo, God of War is all but confirmed, and Ratchet & Clank is also there, as well as the Demon's Souls remake. And there's even more games that Sony has not announced yet, too. Like, for example, we might see the next Naughty Dog game. Of course, The Last of Us Part 2 is very recent, but they might tease the next Naughty Dog game, or there's even rumors of Ben's Studio. Is it Ben's Studio? No, not Ben's Studio. It's, I believe Sony San Diego, which is the guys behind MLB The Show, which is actually going to be going multi-platform next year, which is very interesting. They are supposedly working on a new Uncharted game. And a lot of the people from Naughty Dog that worked on Uncharted have moved over to that studio to work on it, as Naughty Dog themselves have said that they're basically done with Uncharted. Which is kind of odd, but at the same time it makes sense. I mean, they concluded Nathan Drake's story. There's nothing really else to talk about at that point. Plus, there was The Lost Legacy as well. But yeah, so the main standpoint I'm trying to make here with Sony's games is Sony has big titles. Spider-Man, huge. Ratchet & Clank, huge. Horizon, huge. God of War, huge. Demon's Souls, huge. And there's even more games that we aren't even confirmed yet. And the big thing is those titles are either at launch or within the first year or two. Compare this to Microsoft. Microsoft has Halo Infinite at launch, but it's going to be on Xbox One as well. And the game was designed around Xbox One. And the game is very divisive right now. We're going to have to see what happens when it launches. I'm still looking forward to it, but, we'll see what happens. But after that, we don't really know anything for 2021. All the other games they showcased were like 2022 or 2023. Like they didn't even give us a release date. Like the new Forza Motorsport reboot, there was no release date. The new Fable game, no release date. State of Decay 3, no release date. And there was a couple other games as well they showed that had no release date. Whereas Sony has at least a couple of their big hitters for 2021 already, Microsoft has nothing for 2021 right now. It's just Halo Infinite at launch, and then there's like this big gap where there's nothing. Now, obviously, there's going to be stuff. They just haven't announced it yet. But as of right now, the Sony lineup is much, much stronger than Microsoft. And, again, Sony has that brand power, that they have that built-in connection with a lot of people where, like, they're going to buy a PS5 no matter what. It doesn't matter if it's $600. People will buy a PlayStation 5 no matter what, because it has Spider-Man, because it has Ratchet & Clank, because it has God of War, because it has Horizon, because it has Demon's Souls. People are going to buy a PlayStation 5 no matter what. They are already locked in, or as business folk would say, the built-in install base, or the built-in fan base, or whatever. Microsoft doesn't have that luxury. Microsoft doesn't have nearly as big of a built-in fan base that will be there no matter what. Sure, they do have a dedicated fan base that will always be there, but it's nowhere near as big as Sony's. Sony has people by the balls with their games. Microsoft doesn't. Microsoft has to win people over. They don't have a built-in install base that they can continually rely on, no matter what. That will always be there. Sony has that. Or at least they have it for right now. Unless they do something really, really bad. Which I really don't think is going to happen at this point. Unless they do something so bad that it'll make people go to Microsoft. I don't see that changing. Sony just have it right now. They have everything going for them. And I guess that brings us, into the other thing. The last big point I want to talk about here when it comes to what PlayStation has over Microsoft. Microsoft just doesn't have something that's so good that it'll sway the current PS4 install base away from PS5. Microsoft doesn't have a game that looks so good that people are going to sacrifice being able to play all those other franchises. Like, let's say, Fable comes out, and it's amazing. Or Avowed comes out. That was the other game I forgot to mention. Avowed, that's probably the most exciting game that Microsoft has going for them right now. But that game is several years away, and there's no release date. Well, by the time that game releases, even if it really is as good as it looks, it might be too late. Because by that point, the PlayStation 5 will have already entrenched itself as the console of the generation, the same way that the PS4 was this time around. And most of the people that want to play Avowed will probably just either stream it from Game Pass, or if they might stream it from xCloud, or they'll play it on PC, or at best case scenario for Microsoft, they'll buy a Series S just to play that one game. And maybe they'll stick around, but overall, it's just like Microsoft just doesn't have again, it comes back to that same thing. They don't have the games to sway people away. Because here's the thing. There's been, of course, the narrative for a long time now. Microsoft has no games. Xbox has no games. here's the thing. Here's the reality of the situation. They have games. They just don't have games that are good enough to sway people away from PlayStation. Like, even if Halo Infinite was the best Halo game ever, it wouldn't be enough to sway people away from getting Spider-Man, or Ratchet & Clank, or Horizon, or God of War, or Demon's Souls, or if Uncharted comes back. Like, it's just not enough. They need to have multiple big, exciting games that will sway the PS4 and eventually PS5 audience. They just don't have that. I'm looking forward to Halo Infinite. I'm looking forward to the Series X still, but it's not really. There's not really a comparison here. It's PlayStation just has everything going for it. Really, there's very little that Sony doesn't have going for them. About the only thing they don't have going for them is, like, maybe, if this happens, free online. Because there have been rumors for a little while now that Microsoft is going to be getting rid of Xbox Live Gold and making online completely free across the board, which would be huge for Microsoft. But would it be enough to sway people from PlayStation? Now, if you're a part of the COD FIFA crowd that just plays those couple of games and that's the only games you play, that might be enough to sway you to Xbox. Like, hey, I can play those games for free online? Sign me up. But the overall install base is not going to be swayed from PlayStation just because of that, I feel. But, you know, who knows? Who knows? We'll have to wait and see what happens. Maybe Microsoft, maybe that's Microsoft's big win outside of the Series S. Maybe their big thing is going to be that, yeah, we're going to have free online. That's going to be our big selling point. And that will be a big selling point for a good amount of people. But is it going to be enough to really compete with PlayStation in that respect? I don't know. We're going to have to just see what happens. But yeah, so PlayStation 5. It has the games. It has the brand power. It has the next-gen look. It has multiple options. It has exclusivity deals. And it has a very strong lineup. And there's even more coming that we don't know about. I mean, Sony has it all. At least right now. Microsoft might have free online. They may have the Series S. They have Game Pass, and Game Pass is awesome, but again, is it enough to sway people away from all of those other benefits that PlayStation has? I think the fact is, as of right now, that answer is no. But we'll just have to wait and see what happens. This generation hasn't begun yet. We still have several months until release, and anything is possible. But yeah, the takeaway from this video, I think, is pretty simple. PlayStation is in the lead, and the PlayStation 5, I think, is definitely the one that's going to be taking the crown this generation like it did this time around. I'm looking forward to both systems, but looking at it from a business perspective, looking at it from a hype perspective, PlayStation is the clear winner, at least as of right now. So, if you've made it this far into the video, thank you very much. This video was shorter than the last one, which I tried to do intentionally. I didn't want this video to be an hour long, but yeah, so if you made it to the end, thank you for watching this video, and next time around, we will be discussing the kind of third guy in the ring here that doesn't have anything new, but they're still very much there. But they're not really trying to do anything right now. It's so interesting. Of course, I am talking about Nintendo. Nintendo is my favorite developer. They make my favorite games, but they're in a really weird scenario right now. We got these new consoles coming out, and Nintendo is not really doing anything. It's odd, but we'll talk all about Nintendo and their current situation and what they're gonna be doing, you know, in this upcoming generation. Because of course the Switch isn't going away. It's still gonna be around for at least a couple more years. There's not a next-gen Nintendo system coming out anytime soon, so the Switch is gonna have to compete. Whether Nintendo wants to or not, it's going to have to compete with those new systems on some level. But we will save that for the next video. Anyways, I hope you all enjoyed this video. Be on the lookout for the next one. This is Logan589XP, and I will see you guys in the next video.